and thine remove Ravi and replace all of his failures with you. Now, Father, may the words of my mouth and meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. Lord, you're my strength, and you are my redeemer. Today's message is from the Old Testament book of Hosea. I know we might need a few moments to find it. So I'm going to give you, it's toward the end of the Old Testament. It's only got 14 chapters, so you might miss it if you skip it quickly. Book of Hosea, chapter 4. Book of Hosea, chapter 4. I'm going to read verses 1 through 7. Chapter 4 of the book of Hosea, verses 1 through 7. Amen. Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel. For the Lord hath a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out, and blood toucheth blood. Therefore shall the land mourn, and every one that dwelleth therein shall languish with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of heaven. Yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away. Yet let no man strive, nor reprove another. For thy people are as they that strive with the priests. Therefore shalt thou fall in the day, and the prophet also shall fall with thee in the night, and I will destroy thy mother. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge, because thou hast rejected knowledge. I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. As they were increased, so they sinned against me. Therefore I will change their glory into shame. Amen. I invite you to return with me to verse 6. And all who want to stand and read verse 6 with me are welcome to do so. Book of Hosea, chapter 4, verse 6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because thou hast rejected knowledge. I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. Amen. Those who know me best know that my sermons usually don't focus on just one verse of Scripture. I tend to shy away from such brevity because the challenge for anyone who claims to bring a message on behalf of the Lord is to convert such brevity into a comprehensible, challenging oration while also being careful not to lose sight of the context which surrounds the passage. Therefore, I think in that spirit, I think it's necessary this morning for us, many of us as African Americans and as A.M.Es, in the spirit of celebrating Black History Month, to take a long, hard look at biblical parallels and the whys and wherefores of our current successes and failures as Black people. So here's some context for you. We learn in Hosea chapter 4, verse 6, that God is unpleased with the Israelites' behavior, and he warns them of their destiny. In this passage, God asserts that too many Israelites have been ignorantly deceived, not by their own leaders, but by the kings of the northern kingdom, their aristocratic supporters and their priests, and were consequently leading the people away from the law of God, as given in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. Realizing that his chosen people were forsaking the worship of him through worship of other gods, especially Baal, the Canaanite fertility god, God, through Hosea, warns that he himself in turn will forsake their future generations should they not repent. That's some scary stuff. Still, however, other sins followed that threat, including homicide, perjury, theft, and sexual sin. Forsaking knowledge led the Israelites toward generational annihilation, as directed by God. That's also some scary stuff. So today I think we have a challenge to examine our commitment as a local church institution and as individuals to pursue education for ourselves and to help ensure education is achieved for some that we do not know. I suggest that we challenge ourselves to educate our own and also challenge ourselves to actually go out and educate others. And I hope to encourage some today in the direction of our efforts toward this godly goal. We're all familiar, right, with the phrase, each one must teach one. Or the scripture from Proverbs 22:6, right, to train a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he won't turn from it. And most of us know Ephesians 6:4, the New Testament, which preaches, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Or finally, what about the word that God instructs himself after telling of the 10 Commandments in Deuteronomy? Chapter 11, 18 to 21 reads, fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates, so that the days of your children may be many in the land that the Lord swore to give. We are some mighty aware Christians. Many of us are aware of a lot of familiar biblical passages, particularly concerning our faith in God. But the challenge for us, I think, is what does that awareness actually mean for us today? Well, I think that it means that we can't be actually content with just being aware. Or as young folks say, staying woke. I think that we actually have to be more than just be aware or stay woke. We've got to actually be awake. We must be sure not to be among the ignorant, because Hosea warns what happens. And there are a lot of awake people. Awake people who are aware of pragmatic realities and systems and cultures and institutions that both impede social progress from time to time, but are also the locus of power. Far too many of us already know that system. We know it all too well. But we might not have the relationship with the people, with the community, with you and me. Or we might not know how to switch it up. Meaning that we can't flow easily between the hood and the boardroom, between Main Street and Wall Street. And that's why we need to be both woke and awake for this work that we are called to do for Jesus. Is in fact work. We can joke about it from time to time about the labor involved and laugh at various expressions of being woke. But in reality, we know that the consequence of not being awake and just being woke is that we're only aware. So if you aren't woke and awake, you aren't connected to your community. You're not really connected to your home. You're not connected to your goals and the needs of your community. You're not connected to your purpose. If you aren't both woke and awake, then you're not really alive. Yeah, to be fair, I know some of you have already mad at me. We've got the passion, right? Many of us are doing this work. We've got the spirit. We have the energy. Many of us have some good ideas. But far too many of us really don't seem to understand how to actually make those goals a reality. Come on. Or could it be that we just aren't willing to do the real work to get it done? Don't get me wrong, many activists I know are sacrificing all that they can. So not all woke people are uninformed. But don't ignore the epidemic of bandwagon activists, what we in political science call the free rider problem. People who jump in the action after the groundwork has already been done, and they come in to reap the rewards. You know people like that, right? The problem of that is that there are no individual rewards to being woke. This is collective work. It's a collective responsibility. It's a collective sacrifice. It's collective leadership. We need to stop just taking up collections and learn how to be a collection. A cultural collection. And in today's climate, that can be so very hard. I'm very much aware of that, believe me. I know it's not easy, especially as many of us are threatened just by waking up every day and being smart and bold and talented and not ashamed. That is a threat to many already. There's a reason why they don't want slaves reading, y'all. There's a reason why they didn't want black folks and brown folks and women voting. There's a reason why they didn't want people without property to participate in our democratic politics. Never forget those reasons. Never forget those centuries of missed opportunities for black people. Now, we must work together by being woke and awake to realize the dreams of those that came before us. And by doing so, we in turn achieve our own dreams. This isn't really rocket science. But it does take a commitment, acknowledgement of responsibility, and it takes some sacrifice of your time, of your talent, and yes, we're going to ask you for your money. So don't just be woke. Don't just be the one who can spit rhyme but can't write it. That's right. Don't be the one who can buy the house on the hill but you can't also design it. Don't be the one who tells me what you know but then you can't teach it to somebody else too. I stopped by this morning after a week of traveling to remind all of us that education, a path leading to knowledge, is important because we worship a teacher. Therefore, truth, Trump really should hear this. Truth is education. Truth is growth. Truth is knowledge. Truth nullifies mere gossip. Truth challenges opinions. Truth is the antithesis of ignorance. Jesus said that we are not to worship him ignorantly, but in spirit and in truth. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And hence, if you have not been taught the truth, you cannot worship God. If Jesus is the truth, then mathematics, history, geography, science, and languages are also all truths. Hence, it's necessary that we understand that God's people should be in constant search of all truth. Real worship, then, is based on being taught. Another reason why Christians should be concerned about education is because education is preparation for true worship. By that I mean, without proper knowledge, your worship will suffer. Whether it be the truth of science or history or some other subject, all truth is a part of God. God is the one who made the universe. So if we understand the universe, we must first then seek to understand God. If we love God and we want to worship God, we ought to be interested in all of his creation. If what I'm suggesting is right, then one reason why we might care about education, especially the education of those foreign to us, given this immigration debacle, is because education is worship.
Yeah.
And you're probably thinking then, well, we have perhaps failed to worship God effectively. And I actually would somewhat agree with that. Ponder this. Worship extends, usually, for most of us, not only beyond Sunday, as we are all often reminded, by worship, we extend the conventional narrative of a church pew, a tambourine, or some drums. And comparably, education extends beyond adults teaching children. I know some of us don't want to hear this, you know. But it also includes children teaching adults. And children teaching children. And of course, maybe the hardest, adults teaching adults. That's very hard. In the end, though, worship indeed includes the education of our people. That's why we have church school, which most of us do not attend. Let's be honest. Carter G. Woodson, the founder of what is today Black History Month, and the founder of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, wrote a book in 1933 entitled The Miseducation of the Negro. And in it, he says this, quote, "When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him not to stand here or to go yonder. He will find his proper place and will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. His education makes it necessary." As you see from Brother Woodson, our forefathers and our foremothers understood this concept of education beautifully. As we celebrate Black history, we remember that the A.M.E. Church was not only the first major religious denomination in the Western world that had its origins in sociological rather than solely theological beliefs. We also remember that the A.M.E. Church was not only the first African-American organized and incorporated denomination in the United States, but we also remember that the A.M.E. Church sponsored the first independently, historically black college, Wilberforce University. And since the establishment of Wilberforce in 1863, the A.M.E. Church has sponsored other colleges, including Allen, Edward Waters, Morris Brown, Paul Quinn, and Shorter. Our history as a church is that of a people who financially and physically support our fellow persons in pursuit of education. This is not to say we did everything correct as AMEs. While most of our AME-sponsored colleges were led by black presidents, the majority of other HBCUs, like the 11 sponsored by the United Methodist Church, were led by white presidents for a long time. The problem with this was that the 19th century white vision of blacks as an inferior and unassailable class of unskilled workers shaped the fundamental mission of many of those colleges under their white presidents' leadership as industrial education for men and for women, housekeeping, sewing, babysitting, and baking cakes for white people. The white founders and the supporters of black colleges were reluctant to entrust control of the institutions to black people. After a century of white administrative leadership, whites only relinquished control when they were experiencing periods of financial distress. What we call in political science the hollow prize. Finally get in after all the money's gone. Some argue they passed the torch to blacks with an expectation of failure, setting up a convenient scapegoat if the institutions were to fail. The point here is that even in our past efforts, we were challenged to meet certain educational goals for our fellow persons, and we simply did not. Rather, many bought into the white doctrine of black inferiority. Many black people bought into that. And many blacks today still buy into it. What is necessary to rid ourselves of this thinking and to worship God more fully through the education of our people, I think, is to cultivate a knowledge base grounded in the liberation of the black church. Theology is both an academic discipline and a practical responsibility of the church. However, in its academic form, it is generally foreign to the church. After completing theological school, many young ministers, for example, have to struggle to make their new knowledge relevant to ordinary folk, like you and me, who make up the church. The language they understand needs to be understandable to the masses. This black activist theology, then, is kind of necessary to develop to ensure that we meet our educational goals as black people and that we avoid the wrath of God as spoken in Hosea chapter 4. At its best, a black activist theology would enable blacks to stop victimizing each other, such as through black-on-black crime, although that is not nearly as pervasive as white-on-white crime. Or perpetuating the poor self-esteem engendered through years of living in a racist society that many of us have. Black activist theology at its best should be the method of analyzing the gospel's concern with breaking the chains of oppression. Hence, theory and practice should join together to counter oppression and injustice. Like Hosea's mentor A.M.E says, but let justice flow like a river, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Most people think Dr. King said that. That was actually King. Going even further, black activist theology powerfully purports that Jesus is the liberator, and that God sides with the oppressed. God sides with the abused. God sides with the diseased and the forgotten. However, this realization fails to effectively deal with, I think, a major problem at hand. We still have systemic poverty and suffering that disproportionately affects black folks. So embracing a black activist theology is not perfect, but it's a start. We must finish the theory, as Jesus did, through our actions. And we're in good company. For centuries, many of the world's most famous African Americans have been A.M.Es. As our beautiful young people described so eloquently earlier. Give them a round of applause. We are blessed to be a part of a denomination that values education, that supports our young people. People like Jarena Lee, whom Richard Allen, our founder, approved as the first female minister. Or Harriet Tubman, or Sojourner Truth, or Frederick Douglass, or Madam C.J. Walker, all A.M.Es, y'all, or Rosa Parks, or A.G. Gaston, or Ramsey Lewis, and I could go on. We've got among our members Harold Washington, former mayor of Chicago, Tom Bradley, former mayor of L.A., Vernon Jordan, former advisor to President Clinton, Alcee Hastings, Louis Stokes, Congressman, Floyd Flake in New York, Tony Braxton, Nina Simone, Roberta Flack. I know y'all know these people. I'm not going to ask you where you were last night. I know some of y'all know these names. Ethel Waters, Dionne Warwick, Jackie Robinson, and the leader of CORE, James Farmer. And in the music and arts and the industry, I could stand up here for 20 minutes and keep naming famous A.M.Es. Those people who have done so much for this country, we can lean on as our fortitude. Because their success in life, as members of the A.M.E church, is really success for all of us. But we can't rest on our laurels. We must also work now and in the future to improve ourselves, our church, and our nation. Those who know me well know I'm about finding solutions, both immediate and long term. And what I've been speaking of in terms of cultivating a black activist theology in honor of Black History Month is to assist us in the proper and full education of our people, and therefore the full worship of God. And we understand that this is a long-term effort. Changing behavior, we know, is never an immediate action. But there are some immediate things that we can actually do. There are some efforts we can initiate right now in our quest to glorify God through our education. First, we can tithe. It's real quiet. Surprised some of y'all not walking out. We can tithe. While I understand that many churchgoers are plagued by poverty and underemployment, know that you are not alone. And know that helping the church to embrace the black activist theology will help you actually climb the economic ladder. But those who are economically secure should understand that tithing significantly affects the liberation of black people. With that money, the church and its activist role will be able to devote resources to public policy issues, such as housing for the poor, efforts to curb drug abuse, teenage pregnancy, divorce, family violence, just to name a few. In addition to tithing, we can adopt a public school, where we might send volunteers to share with young black students about the value of a quality education. In this role, we would serve as education mentors. Even if we're uncomfortable with tutoring an adult to read or a child to learn math, we can help find tutors or provide volunteers qualified to teach those subjects. We could also conduct some after-school tutorials or perhaps a summer school program. And we don't have to do it alone. Organizations like the National Science Foundation, the Association for the Advancement of Science, Apple Computers, and the Carnegie Corporation are all on record of having given churches money to develop such programs. And now the federal government, I think this is still accurate to last month, I don't know, through faith-based initiatives offers some potential assistance as well. And I know, many of us are tired of the work, be honest. It's okay, to be honest. Nothing wrong with being tired. We feel as though we've reached the pinnacle of success, right? We've gone from slavery to freedom. We don't believe that we've got much work left to do. What else is there to fight for, right? We all have voting rights now. We have opportunities for employment and health care, etc. And so many people I meet, so many black people I meet, really don't know what to do. And I have to say we're wrong. We need to know that we're talking about this morning education and the lack of it and God's wrath for the ignorant. And that this is real. The lives lost is real. The treaties broken are real. The boys and girls in prison for an ounce of weed, while the billionaires who raped us of our homes and savings sit pretty. That's real. At the same time, the 40% of the 843 police killings in 2016 were black and Latino victims. But they make up less than 30% of the entire United States population. I believe we must love and support one another. That we need to prove that our lives matter far before we deliver the eulogy. So what can or should churches do to help? For one reason, I think churches should unabashedly affirm certain values that are crucial in American culture. Those of us that are here on this side of the water. Values that affirm truth, beauty, goodness, integrity, honor, decency, and common humanity. These values collaboratively work against the popularized cynicism in American culture that we see today in our American politics. So we should support our neighbor in their pursuit of education here in Richmond. Don't be jealous. Support them. But we must also especially do so at our black colleges. since they will continue to be needed to offer examples of black leadership and black control, but also to affirm a sense of positive self-esteem and self-worth in its students. And here at home, we can support these efforts more broadly by finding a student and working with them diligently. We must work with them and teach them that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. We must work with them and show them that all education starts with knowing God. We have an obligation to inform each other, and especially our young, of the consequences of dishonoring God through your choice to be ignorant. As the story of Hosea shares, God will allow the Israelites' nation to be destroyed. And the people will be taken into captivity by Assyria, the greatest nation of the time, if their actions of idolatry, violence, oppression, and sexual sin persisted. Sounds a bit familiar with this recent election that we have seen that has occurred largely on the backs of ignorant Americans.
Come on.
But I'll leave that alone.
Talk about this.
And I think there's really still some good news, though. I know this message, I realized it myself coming to it this week, is quite dire. And so there is some good news. I think all of this effort to fully embrace education as a form of worship, toward God, promises to lead to an abundantly powerful life. That, coupled with our gradual acceptance of the black activist theology, can stir up in us self-respect and positive self-esteem in spite of our oppression. We will become more confident in our articulation of history by being reminded of the realities of our heritage. But not only that, if we do these things, we will be concurrently informing children and adults that they are part of God's plan. That God promises blessings and prosperity to all who trust and obey him. In fact, the story of Hosea ends with that realization. Not only was the metaphorical prediction of Assyria's takeover historically correct, because Assyria did capture Samaria, the capital of the northern kingdom, in 722 BC. Yes, there actually are facts in the Bible, y'all. But although God warned of the pitfalls of a lack of knowledge on behalf of the Israelites, they were ultimately purified and restored because they sought the education necessary to avoid God's abandonment of them and their children's generation. So God scared them, threatened them with his wrath, and then they willingly sought that education to avoid that abandonment. They repented. They turned to worship God thoroughly through their acquiring of knowledge and by following his commands. And we too must do the same. Yes. If we seek to worship God fully and to avoid his warning in Hosea chapter 4, where he declares he will forget thy children. And as I begin to take my seat, I suggest we start now. I make a recommendation, actually, that we start perhaps by joining in Balm and Gilead's annual Black Church Week of Prayer for the healing of HIV and AIDS. From March 5th to March 12th of this year, black churches worldwide will be educating their congregations on this disease and epidemic, distributing information on prevention and intervening treatments, and encouraging parishioners to get tested and develop partnerships with local health agencies, and most importantly, affirming for people living with HIV that they too are still children of God. Churches are encouraged to dedicate a Sunday worship service during the month of March to the week of prayer and the healing of AIDS, including a sermon offering an effective and affirming message regarding our daily realities living in the midst of the AIDS pandemic. You do live in Richmond, Virginia, and the pandemic here is severe. Churches are also encouraged to host a community conference or a workshop on HIV or AIDS and and to collaborate with the health agency to set up potential testing at a church, or host a community vigil for AIDS, for the healing of AIDS, or make HIV and AIDS a topic of the weekly Bible study, or choir rehearsal, or ministerial staff meetings, or plan a program that targets young people, and consider forming an HIV and AIDS ministry to respond to the crisis within the community. I will pass the Reverend Boyd some of that information if we want to pursue that next month. But for now, I encourage us to walk boldly in the education that God has prepared for you. Stand tall with that knowledge that you are God's child. Reach out and touch somebody's mind. Encourage yourself and others to fulfill the worship commandments by God and to use our resources to educate, to educate, to educate. Amen. We owe it to our forebears. We owe it to the legacy of our A.M.E. first and our A.M.E. famous members who have done so much for our global community. And we owe it to our children so God will not forsake them. We owe it to ourselves. But most of all, we owe the responsibility of being educated to God. Education is a commandment of God. Ignorance will beget his wrath. To God be the glory. Amen.